Joined now by one of the signatories, the former Brexit Secretary David Davis. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. What do you want to see happen?
Well, what's happening at the moment, got 12,000 Albanians in 1 year from a safe country. You know, it's a member of the European Convention on Human Rights, as we are. And I want two things to happen. We want two things to happen. One, such people to be told, you can't claim asylum here immediately, a summary decision on that. There's no argument for asylum from Albania here. Secondly, those who use the human trafficking laws, we should say to them, look, if you have been human trafficked, surely the right answer is to put you back in your own home, in your own village, back in Albania. If you want to process it beyond that, then talk to us after that, but you're going home. The point is to turn the turnaround time for an Albanian landing on our shores from years to days or weeks. And that's the aim, and we think it's possible. If we don't do it, the Home Office is never going to be able to cope with the number of applications. It's already 420 days to get a decision. It'll get longer and longer, and eventually all those decisions will allow people to stay.
See, the Home Office doesn't agree with you because of the 55% of asylum applications by adult Albanians, they've been allowed to stay.
No. What's been happening is if you turn it into two groups, young men, which is the vast majority, and women and children. Women and children have been getting about 85% approval. That's because the Home Office itself has not been interpreting the asylum laws correctly.
So it's the Home Office's fault, not the Albanians?
It's a mixture. No, at the end of the day, the blame for this lands with the Albanian gangs who bring them here, not the Albanians themselves, because they're all sorts of fairly innocent people. It's the Albanian gangs that bring them here. But the simple truth is that the Home Office is interpreting asylum laws to say if you are in Albania, not if the government is oppressing you, which is what asylum laws are like. So you've been talking about China. If somebody came from China saying, my government's going to kill me, we give them asylum. But if they're facing gangsters, criminal activities and so on in their own country, that's a misinterpretation of the asylum laws. It was never designed for that.
Well, interestingly, the Albanian Prime Minister saying that he's not having Albanians being scapegoated because of failed policy here in the UK.
Well, I mean, I'm not scapegoating the individual Albanians. What I'm saying is that the gangs, before you set off across the channel, if you're a migrant, the Albanians gangs brief them on how to use loopholes in our law. What I want to do is to close those loopholes. So if you like, I'm agreeing with the Albanian Prime Minister. We need to fix our own problem. He needs to fix some too in terms of trafficking out of his country.
OK, you talk about people not being able to come here if they've come from a safe country. Surely that means France?
Yeah, well, it does. I mean, there's a secondary issue here, which we haven't addressed in this because it's been going on for years and nobody seems to be able to resolve it, and that is that any asylum seeker's real primary right is to be able to stop in the first safe country they arrive in, right? So that could be France. In this case, if they've crossed Europe, it's about 6 other countries, right? But we can't enforce that. But what we can do is say, you're an Albanian, you go back to Albania.
Isn't that the problem, though, that we can't enforce that? Isn't that where the problem lies?
Oh, well, there are several links in this problem. What we're
Why are you not addressing that one as well?
Well, because we're focusing on the one that's quickest to fix. I mean, this one, if the government puts through emergency legislation, very, very unusually, I mean, I normally oppose emergency legislation, but very, very unusually, there's a very, very strong argument for doing this. It'll be a very short bill. It will go through, and basically we could say to the Albanian population now, anybody else who comes across the channel will be sent back. And when that starts to happen, there's no bigger deterrent. Remember, the Home Office's argument on the Rwanda policy, for example, is this is a deterrent. Think, there's no bigger deterrent than if somebody in your village pays thousands of pounds to a human trafficker and then ends up back in the village 3 weeks later.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Rwanda, because how's that working out for this government?
Well, I'm not a fan of Rwanda. I mean, I've got to be careful because not everybody who signed the letter agrees with me on that. But I'm not a fan of Rwanda policy because we've spent 140 million. And the indications are that even if it works at all, it won't take more than 200 people. It's a bad idea. It won't work.
Yeah, but my point is that it's a piece of legislation that was put through the House of Commons by this government, and it has not been successful. Why do you think emergency legislation, which is rushed through by its very description, is going to be any more effective?
Because this addresses the two main loopholes that are used by people traffickers to bring people into Britain illegally. That's what it does. There are two main loopholes. One is in our asylum law, one is in our trafficking law. And interestingly, in November of 2021, I think it was, Sweden looked at this and said, we're going to stop anybody claiming asylum from a safe country, in this case Albania. And you know what? They've approved 0 since, and nobody's taken them to court.
Talk to me about the Tory exodus while I've got you. A lot of youngsters, I'll describe them as that, Diana Davison particularly. I mean, she wasn't even born when you became an MP.
I'll say everybody's a youngster to me. I understand, Kay.
What's going on?
Hey, you're a child.
What's going on?
Oh, well, I think some people are deciding they came into politics, they enjoyed it for a while, now they don't. You know, I mean, William Bragg, he said, you know, he had a great time, he's been chairman of a committee and so on. While he's still young enough to have another career, he's going to go and do that. You know, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. I can't tell you the answers to all those. I mean, you know, I'm going to be here till I die in harness, I suspect.
Although, am I right in saying that your constituency is going to be affected by boundaries again?
Oh, cut to bits again. You know,
Is it?
Yeah, third time. I mean, I end up with about half of my existing constituency. But what's been the case since, well, I mean, since over a decade, is we've got, in the eyes of the Boundary Commission at least, one too many MPs for what was the old Humberside. That's East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. And so they had to shrink them down, and so one will go.
And the Boundary Change, or the Boundary Change Commission, do you think that they have the best interests of your constituents and others in mind when they come up with these new boundaries?
Well, I'm sure they intend to. Whether they get it exactly right, well, there's a consultation process. We are actually currently engaged in a consultation process on that, and indeed I've talked to them. I will be writing to them rather about one component of my current constituency to try and ensure that it stays together rather than get broken up and sent to this piece and that piece.
Can I ask you about wind farms? Where are you on that?
I'm not in favour of this so-called Tory rebellion in favour of liberalising the law on wind farms.
Is that because you're a NIMBY?
I've got one right next door. I mean, nearly as close as the camera to my house. But you know,
Would you rather it wasn't there?
Yes, frankly, but you know, it ruins the skyline. But so what? The more important point here is that we've got offshore wind farms now coming. We've got to be sure that when we go towards hitting net zero, that we do it in a way that takes the population with us, takes the nation with us, and that applies to whether it's wind farms or massive solar farms. Now that we're covering not half the country, but great tranches of the country in solar farms. Fine, let's go down that route, but let's make it at least responsive to the ideas of local people.
Before I let you go, it would appear that the way for Conservative MPs to be popular is to go on to I'm a Celebrity. Do you think that's what Rishi Sunak's are doing?
No, certainly not. No. I mean, look, I've had to spend time in a jungle eating horrible things, but never on television, and I wouldn't recommend it.
It's good to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
My
I really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Thank you. Very quick look at the